Hello everyone, welcome back to MalStorm Gaming. My name is Malachi Gardner, and today I'm going to be starting my playthrough of To the Death by Brian Garber. I hope you all enjoy the video. The first step to setting up your game of To the Death is deciding whether you would like to play a competitive game where two players will each control a team of heroes and they battle against each other to see who comes on top, or you could play the solo mode where you will take your team of heroes against waves of monsters that are going to be coming out of a deck that you need to defeat in order to win, and that is what we are going to be doing today. We're going to be doing just the solo mode. That is what I'm going to be showing you today. Maybe at some point in the future I'll show you the competitive mode, but for today we're going to do the solo mode. After that, you need to decide if you would like to play the standard random scenario for the solo mode, or if you'd like to use one of these 10 challenge cards, which adds some story and other challenges to the game. Now, these are for more advanced players, and as such, we are not going to be using these. We're just going to be doing the basic game, so we're not going to need those. Now that we are just going to be doing a random scenario, we're going to take the top 4 cards of these monsters right here. So I'll have 4 monsters, and then we're going to take one of these Monster King cards, and we're going to take the 4 monsters and put those on top. So we have a deck of 5 cards with 4 monsters on top, and then a king, which is like the boss monster, on the bottom. So the goal is going to be to defeat all 5 of these monsters without dying. Then we're going to choose our 4 heroes. Now, there are 4 classes of heroes. There are the Menders, who are the healers and support classes in the game. There are the Champions, which are the high armor, tanky characters. And then there's the Magicians, who are the wizards and spellcasters. And then finally, the Fighters, who are characters who don't use magic primarily, but they mostly just use their weapons. So you're going to choose one character from each class type. So for the Menders, we're going to be using a monk. For our champion, we're going to use the Exiled King. For the Magicians, we're going to be using our Shadow Mage. And then for the Fighters, we're going to be using the Archer. All of the monsters, Monster Kings, and characters that we have not selected can be returned to the box, like I will be doing right now. So you're not going to need all those things. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that you don't need each game, which means that you're going to have all sorts of different combinations and replayability that you have because of that. Then, the next thing is you're going to need to choose damage cards for each of the characters you've chosen. For each of the 4 classes in the game, there are 4 different damage cards on 2 double-sided cards. Each card has 6 sections, which corresponds to the 6 hit points that each character has. As you take damage, you are going to be going down from 6 hit points to 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then hopefully not 1. And as you do that, you're going to be gaining more abilities as listed on the card. So all these are slightly different, and I'll get into what this all means in just a little bit. But for my Mender, I'm going to be using this card. And then we're going to be able to set our Mender like so, with the character card just on top of the 6. And we're going to set that down here, and we're going to set everything else up like that. For the Champion, we're going to take this card right here. The Magician is going to have this one. And then the Fighter is going to take this card. Alright, so if you're familiar with the game, you will know what all that means. And you may have noticed some synergies that I'm trying to go for with my team composition. Then we're going to take these different reference cards, and we're going to set these aside, and when I get more into setting up the actual play area, we're going to use these, and they'll be helpful. Then we're going to take this 32 deck of Arsenal cards. There are 4 suits with numbers 0 and then 2 through 8 of each suit. Now this is the exact same deck that is in Puzzle Dungeon, for those of you who have played that game or watched my playthrough of it. This deck we're going to shuffle up and then set to the side. So, as we play the game, we're going to be drawing cards from this deck and using them to activate our heroes and do different things. So I'll be right back after I set everything up. Alright, so now I have everything set up. We have our 4 heroes all set up with their damage cards. Set to 6. We have the Arsenal deck all shuffled up here, the different play raids, and enemy trackers, and then the enemy deck right here are all up here. And then we have our little play raid card. So, as you can see, I have 2 layers, 2 rows of my characters, and that is because the game takes place with 2 different rows of heroes the entire time. One row is the near row, and that is the front row. Heroes in this area are near. Near heroes may melee attack, which is what that sword symbol means, near enemies, and range attack any enemy. So if you're in the near front row, then you can use melee attacks against anyone in the enemy's front row, and you can do range attacks against anyone. Heroes in this bottom area are far. Far heroes may range attack any enemy. So if there's a sword, it's melee attack. If it's a crosshair, that's range attack. So if you're in the front row, you can do melee attacks against people in the enemy's front row, and you can do range attacks against anyone. If you're in the back row, you can only do range attacks against anyone. You can't do melee attacks, which is pretty self-explanatory because you're behind a row of people, so you can't swing your sword through them. Each character has an arrow on their card that either is red and pointing up or is orange and just pointing down. When setting up, you need to have 2 heroes with each of those symbols. So I need to have 2 heroes with down arrows and then 2 heroes with up arrows. And that is where the heroes will start. So I have to have 2 heroes start in the far area and then 2 starting in the near area, which is what I have here. So my Shadow Mage and Archer both start far, whereas my Monk and Exiled King both start near. Next, we're going to take 5 cards from this deck and add those to our hand. So 3, 4, 5. Alright, so we'll just set those aside. And then we are going to take the first monster that we're going to fight against from the top of this deck that we just assembled. And so we find Ancient Bones. Alright, so the goal of the game is to defeat 5 monsters. 4 of them are going to be normal, and then 1 of them is going to be a king. To defeat a monster, we're going to need to reduce his hit points to 0, unless the card says otherwise. So let's read this card right here. It says, Pile of Bones. At the beginning of the first enemy turn, put a random monster from outside the game into play as a defeated monster. Then put a giant buzzard enemy into play. So at the start of the enemy's first turn, we're going to take a monster from outside the game and bring him in as a defeated monster. And I'll explain why that is important. So the game takes place over 5 rounds. In each round, you're going to be fighting against a monster. So for the first round, we're going to be fighting against the Ancient Bones card here. After we have defeated all the monsters spawned by this card, we're going to go on to the second round, which is going to have the second monster. Each round is divided further into turns, alternating between enemy and hero turns. During the enemy turns, we are going to resolve any abilities that happen at the beginning of their turn, then they're going to make attacks, and then we're going to resolve any abilities that happen at the end of their turn. And then it'll move on to the hero turn. On the hero turn, we are going to be able to use the cards that we drew for our hand to activate our heroes, moving them around, attacking enemies, and casting spells and various things like that to try to defeat the enemies. At the end of our turn, we're going to draw some more cards, and then it'll be the enemy's turn again, and it's going to keep on alternating like that until either we have defeated him or he has defeated us. If we defeat him, then we will move on to the next round, which will have the next monster, and so on and so forth, until either we completely win or we lose. Since the game starts at the enemy's turn, we're going to first resolve any abilities that happen at the beginning of the enemy's turn. And it says at the beginning of the first enemy turn. So this ability will not actually take place at the beginning of the monster's turn every time, but it will take place just the first time. So we're going to take a random monster from outside the game and put it into play as a defeated monster, and then we're going to put a giant buzzard enemy into play. So the giant buzzard has some stats down here, and that has another ability, Mangle. Heroes damaged by this enemy's weapon move far and can't heal damage next turn. So that's not great. There's also this skull ability. Draw one less card during the draw step for each far hero. Alright, so again, I'll explain what all those mean, but first we're going to resolve this ability right here and take a monster from outside the game and put it into play. Alright, so the random monster I drew is this Banshee. So, we are instructed to put this into play defeated. Now, what that means is we're going to take this monster and cover it up with the original monster that we drew, the Ancient Bones, but we're going to leave the skull symbol down here visible. All the abilities on this monster will trigger while this monster is alive. After it dies, we are going to leave the skull symbol visible underneath the next monster, like this one right here with the Banshee, and then it'll add its ability here to this card, which means that for every monster you fight, it will be different based off of the monsters you have defeated earlier. And so the boss monster will have a lot of these skull abilities. Normally at the beginning of the game, you only have the one that's printed on the monster's card, but because of this Ancient Bones ability, we have a second one here. So it says at the end of each hero turn, each hero adjacent to an exhausted hero is dealt 1 damage. Alright, so we're going to take all of this, and then we can set this on the table, but if we finish reading this ability, it says put a giant buzzard enemy into play. So we're going to spawn an enemy with these stats and put them into play. So I will just set this right here, and then I'll take an enemy. So each enemy is going to have a health card, and it's 1 through 9 on this side, and then 10 through 18 on the other side. Then we're going to take the top card of the Arsenal deck, and we're going to set it like this based off of the health that the card here tells us. So we need to set the monster to 6 health. So then we'll bump this up to 6, and then we'll just set this on the table. Alright, so now we're all ready to begin the first round, which, again, starts with the enemies going. So we've already resolved this ability here, and that spawned the monster, and now it is going to attack us. So, you see here on its stats, it has 2 ranged attacks of 4, the shield, which is armor, of 7, the lightning bolt is skill, of 3, and then the health is 6. And then also, it starts far. So, since the enemy starts far, we're going to put him in the back row alongside our heroes. Now, even though it looks like he's in the same row with our heroes, he's actually not. There's a separate row for the enemies and for the heroes, but it is just easier to be able to see it this way if it is all in the same row, but that is just for ease of play. In reality, there are actually 2 separate rows of play. So, each turn, the monster is going to make all of his attacks from left to right. This one only has 2, so he's going to make 2 attacks. So, it has an attack of 4 for both of them, and he's going to discard the top card of this Arsenal deck, and that will determine who he will attack and if he hits or misses. So we'll just discard the top card of this deck right here, and it is an 8 of helmets. Now, you take this card right here, which is called the checked card. That's the card we discarded. And then we're also going to add the weapons value, which is 4, to this. So 8 plus 4, 12. And then we're going to see what that symbol is. Now, it's a helmet, which means it's going to attack our champion. If it were a wand, it would attack our magician. If it was a sword, it would attack our fighter. And then if it was a hand, it would attack our mender. So that's kind of the targeting system. Now, The near and far rules apply to the enemies in much the same way as they apply to the heroes. So we do need to be taking that into account when he's targeting. If the enemy were to target a character that it could not legally hit based off of the near and far rules, for example, if it was a near hero and it was supposed to melee attack a far hero, that is illegal, and so it could not do that. Then you would shift the target to the next alphabetical class. So, if it was supposed to target a magician, it would then shift its focus to a mender, and then champion, and then fighter, looping, like that. And so it will keep on doing that until it can legally target someone. So we're going to check to see where our champion is. Now, our champion is the Exiled King, and he is near. The Ancient Bones, or the Giant Buzzard, is far, and it's making a range attack. And if we look at the card here, it says that far heroes can range attack anyone. So that is legal for the Ancient Bones, or the Giant Buzzard, to attack the Exiled King. So now we're going to take 8, which is our checked card, plus 4 from the weapon, and see if it hits or misses. Each character has an armor value. For the Exiled King, it is a 7. If an attack meets or exceeds the target's armor value, then it is a hit. If it does not meet or exceed, and is lower than the target's armor value, then it is a miss. So as you can see here, 12 is much higher than 7, so that will be a hit. If a target is hit by an attack, unless the card says otherwise, it is dealt 1 damage. But first, you have the chance to respond and block the attack. To do so, you must discard a card with the same value as the checked card. So in this case, the checked card was an 8, so if I had an 8 in my hand, I could discard that card to block the attack. But as you can see, I do not have an 8 in my hand, so I cannot block that attack. So it will go through, and it will deal 1 damage to the Exiled King, reducing him from 6 to 5 hit points. Now, as you see in the 5 hit point box, it says that this hero has plus 1 armor. So now he has 8 armor. And when he only has 4 health, he will have 9. And each character is going to have a slightly different set of bonuses that they get from getting dealt damage. And the more damage they are dealt, the stronger they will get, until they are dealt damage that reduces them to 1 hit point when they are exhausted. But 2 through 5, being at hit points of 2 through 5 will actually make you stronger than being at 6 hit points, which is an interesting mechanic. After resolving the attack completely, you will discard this card, placing it in the discard pile. Then we will move to our next attack, which is an identical attack. So it's a ranged attack of 4. So we're going to discard another card. So it's going to be 4 of swords. So it's going to target the fighter, and it's going to have 4 plus 4, so 8. And then we are going to check our fighter. Our fighter is an archer who has 5 shields, so that will hit the archer. Unless I discard a 4 from my hand. Now, I have a 4 right here, so I think I will discard this card, because it is a 4, and it is the same as the checked card, which is also a 4. I can discard this card to ignore the damage. Alright, so that's good. And now we're going to check to see if there's any more weapons. There are not. And then we're going to check to see if there's any more abilities. Now, first off, there's this Mangle ability that says heroes damaged by this enemy's weapon move far and can't heal damage next turn. I actually forgot to resolve that. The Exiled King was damaged, now is to be moved far. So we're going to move the Exiled King far into the second row. Alright, and then we have an ability here, draw 1 less card during the draw step for each far hero, so that doesn't take into effect now, and then this one also resolves at the end of each hero turn. So that is everything that we must do for the enemy's turn. So now, play moves to the hero turn. So, to see what we can do here, we can look at this double-sided reference card. There are two types of abilities. There are player abilities, which can be activated any number of times per turn, and then there are hero abilities, which may be activated once per hero per turn. So, let's take a look at those. We can discard any card to reset. When we do that, we can shuffle the discard pile into the deck. Alright, then we have discard any card, search. Discard a card to draw a card. So this one, it says discard a card twice, which means we have to discard 2 cards. And as you can see, there's starting to be a little bit of a pattern here. All abilities will require you to discard a card. So the amount of cards you have in your hand are like different action points, you could say almost. So, we can discard a card to move. Move any far hero near and any near hero far. So that allows us to move our heroes around, which we are probably going to want to do because our exiled king, who only has melee attacks, is now moved far, and you cannot make melee attacks when you are far. So we're going to want to move him up, I think. Also, some abilities will trigger based off of adjacency. When you take the move action, in addition to moving vertically, you may also move horizontally to trigger those abilities. Then we also have discard any card to charge. Choose a near hero. While that hero is near, its melee weapons can attack far enemies. So, if we remember from the near-far card here, if a hero is near, it cannot melee attack far enemies. But if you take this charge action, then you can for 1 turn. Which, again, was also an ability that we probably want to take advantage of because our giant buzzard is far. Alright, then we have discard any card with value X, block. So I've already done this action, but I'll still read it. Prevent all damage that would be dealt by an enemy's weapon this attack if the weapon's check is X. So if we discarded a 4, we could block and attack with 4, which is what we actually did. Alright, finally, discard any card. Focus. Add +1 to the next check your hero or your hero's weapon makes this turn. So hero attacks are resolved in the same way as enemy attacks, except for the exception of aiming. They can choose who they want to hit. But if you focus, you can discard cards to gain a greater chance of hitting your target. Alright, so those are all player abilities that we can trigger as many times as we can pay for each turn. And then on the other side, we have the hero abilities. And again, we can choose 1 per hero per turn. So we can discard any card. To attack, we can use melee weapons or ranged weapons. So each character will have, similar to a monster, they will have some weapons listed up here. So this one has 2 range attacks of 0. When you make an attack action by discarding a card, you can make an attack with each of your ranged weapons or each of your melee weapons. You cannot make a melee attack and then a ranged attack. You can do all ranged attacks or all melee attacks. Then, any card to rest. Heal 1 damage from this hero. So that's a simple way of healing. We could discard a card to heal our exiled champion, for example, who has been dealt damage. Or exiled king, sorry. Alright, discard any card with value X. Printed ability. So, we can gain the effect of a printed ability that cards with value X can activate. Each character has 3 abilities here. 1 with values 2 through 4, 1 with 5 through 7, and then 1 with 8. If you discard a card with a value listed there, you can take advantage of whatever ability is there. For example, if we discard a card 2 through 4, so 2, 3, or 4, we can use Shadow Bolt, which is deal 1 damage. Enemies damaged by this ability have -2 skill. Alright, so that is something that you can do, and each character has 3 different abilities. And then we have discard 3 cards with value X, feat. Gain the effect of an ability twice that cards with value X can activate. So if you have 3 cards of the same number, you can discard all of them to activate an ability twice, which can be very cool because, again, normally each hero can only do 1 action
once. And then the final bit of information here are the symbols here. So you have just a key with all the different symbols. Like swords are melee attacks, or melee weapons, crosshairs are ranged weapons, and so on and so forth. I mean, we may need to reference this, but we may not. So we're going to set this down, and then we are going to take our turn. So we have already discarded a card out of our 5 cards to block the attack dealt to our Shadow Mage, or sorry, Archer, but we still have 4 cards. So let's see, what would I like to do? I think that I would like to discard this 2 of Wands to activate my Archer's Aim ability. So it's 2 through 4. So we're going to discard this, and then this hero's ranged weapons deal +1 damage, and then you can make a ranged attack. So normally you just deal 1 damage per hit, but with this we can do 2. So we have a +2 to our attack, so we'll discard a card, and before we draw that card, we could actually discard additional cards from our hand to increase our chances of hitting, but I don't think I want to do that, so I'm just going to draw this here, and it's a 0. So we have 0 plus 2. It's not looking very good, but we can still check. The giant buzzard's armor is 7, so we do miss. That's unfortunate. Okay, so now we have 3 more cards, and we can't use any of these on our archer to activate any hero abilities because we've already just activated one. I think that I would like to discard this 3 of swords. And then I'm going to activate the Shadow Bolt ability that I read off earlier, so I can deal 1 damage, and then enemies damaged by this ability have -2 skill. So that just does 1 damage to the giant buzzard without needing to make any checks, so I'll reduce his health to 5. And then he has -2 skill, so he started with 3 skill, and now he has 1. Skill does nothing by itself, but many abilities will require you to make skill checks, such as the archer's volley ability. So it has a lightning bolt symbol there, and then 10 in parentheses. What that means is you need to make a check, discarding the top card of this deck here, and then adding your skill instead of adding your weapon value. If you meet or exceed the skill value right there, which in this case is 10, then you succeed. If not, you fail. If we succeed this check, we get to deal 1 damage to each near or far enemy, which is kind of cool. So that's how skill checks work. So what I just did is I dealt damage to him, which is the main intent, but as a little side effect, it also makes the giant buzzard less likely to succeed skill checks if he ever needed to make one. Alright, so we can still activate our monk and our exiled king. Alright, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to discard a card, any card, and I'm going to charge with my monk. So that will allow my monk to use melee attacks to hit far enemies. And then I'm going to discard this 5, and I'm going to activate the hero ability called Attack. So I'm going to make a melee attack against the Ancient Bones. So if we look at our monk card here, we see he has 2 melee weapons with a value of 0. So he has +0 to hit, but he gets to make 2 attacks. So I'm going to set this down, and then since I've charged, I can actually target the giant buzzard even though he is far. So for the first attack, it's a 7, which meets the armor value of 7, so I can do 1 damage. And then I'll draw the next one, and it's a 5, which is lower than the 7, and I'm going to get +0, which isn't very good, but I still hit once, but that's a miss. Now, we have no more cards in hand, and so there's no abilities we can do, and so our turn is over, even though the Exiled King did not activate. So now, we are going to draw 5 cards to fill our hand, but the Ancient Bones has an ability here. Draw 1 less card during the draw step for each far hero. Okay, that's interesting. Well, I kind of forgot about that ability. What I should have done is maybe move some people up so that I draw more cards, so I don't have as many far heroes. But as it is, I have 3 far heroes. So instead of drawing 5 cards, I'm going to draw 2. Oh man, that's not great. Oh well. So I'm going to draw my 2 cards. 3 and a 7. So that wasn't the most smart thing I could have done, but you live and you learn. Alright, and then we also have an ability here. At the end of each hero turn, each hero adjacent to an exhausted hero is dealt 1 damage. So exhausted heroes are heroes who have 1 hit point remaining. But luckily, all of our heroes, with the exception of the Exiled King, have 6 hit points. So none of our heroes are exhausted, so we do not have to resolve that. And now, play will move on to the enemy's turn. So again, we can resolve any abilities that happen at the beginning of the turn. This one just happens at the beginning of the first enemy turn, so nothing happens now. It's going to make 2 attacks of 4, so we'll discard a card. 2 helmets, so that's going to target our Exiled King, who has 7 plus 1 because of his damage card. So he has 8 armor, and the Giant Buzzard is going to get a plus 4, so it's going to be a total of 6 when it needs to get 8. So that's a miss. And then we'll draw the next card, and it's an 8. To 1, so 8 plus 4 is again 12, which is almost always a hit. Let's see. Alright, it has a 5 armor rating, so we're going to go down to 5 hit points left. And at 5 hit points, we get plus 1 skill. Okay. So then, that is the enemy's 2 attacks. With the Mangle ability, we move all heroes damaged by this weapon far, but the Shadow Mage is already far, so he can't move far a second time. So that means their turn is over, and now it's our turn. Now, we only have 2 cards, which is not the greatest situation to be in, but let's see what we can do. Well, I think what I would like to do is I would like to discard a card. I think I'm going to discard this 7 right here, and then I'm going to move my monk down. So now my monk is going to be far, along with everyone else. Now, what happens here is that now that everyone's running away, the monsters charge at us, and now therefore we are all near. And so now we are not going to have to draw any fewer amounts of cards from the Ancient Bones ability down here, because we have no far heroes. Now, that puts our heroes a little bit more at risk, because if you are near, then anyone can hit you. It's not just far people that can hit you with range attacks. Now anyone can hit us, even with melee attacks, but in the end, it won't actually do that much to make a difference, because the Giant Buzzard just does range attacks, so it doesn't really matter that much anyway. So now we have a 3, and we are going to be able to do an ability. So I am going to activate my Shadow Mage's Shadow Bolts again, so I'm going to discard this 3. And I'm going to do 1 damage to the Giant Buzzard, so he has 3 hit points left, and he has 1 skill again. Now, the reason that he went back up to 3 is because at the end of each turn, everyone's stats and abilities all reset. So, since I reduced his skill last time, it resets at the end of my turn, unless a card says otherwise. So, for example, this monk's ability, Inner Peace, says heroes heal plus 1 damage when they rest. I can do a melee attack or rest. This ability does not last for the entire game. It only lasts for the rest of this turn. And to signify that, we can take one of these reminder cards and tuck it under our character card with the 5 to 7 revealed, showing that our 5 to 7 ability has been triggered this turn. And then at the end of our turn, we can just remove this. And it will no longer trigger. There are some abilities that actually do specifically say, next turn, such and such happens. And those abilities, of course, do not expire at the end of your turn. They expire at the end of your next turn. So now, we have no cards in our hand. We can't do anything, so we can just draw back up to 5. And then, we can start the next round. Now, I'm going to kind of leave you at a cliffhanger. And next week, you're going to have to wait until next week to see what happens. Do our heroes defeat the giant buzzard and make it to what's beyond, or are they ultimately defeated? I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope you all will continue watching to see what happens. I hope you all have a great day, and happy gaming!